Hey everybody, Pete A. Turner from Lions Rock Productions and executive producer and host of the Break It Down Show. Today's guest is Jordan French. Jordan is a combination of a lot of things. An engineer, an intellectual property attorney. He's dynamic, he's creative. He started a 3D pizza printing company to help NASA get to Mars, and he's done other things. Now, he's the executive editor at GritDaily News, and this is where we get to bring in our co-host today. I've got Sandra Ponce de Leon. We used to do Popping the Bubble together. Now she sometimes comes in and contributes with great guests from her world and technology. So we've got this guy who's a top growth hacker, Jordan French, coming in, Sandra, who writes for GritDaily, and these guys are really awesome. One of the best ways to support them is to go to the South by Southwest page where GritDaily is nominated to be a potential presenter, and they would love it if you vote. I would love it if you support the Break It Down Show by subscribing, rating, reviewing, sharing. Any of those things is great. And as always, contribute to Save the Brave. I challenge any of you to hit me up on Twitter, Facebook, on any social media, and say, hey, I've subscribed to help the Save the Brave folks every month with the donation of X number of dollars, $5, $10, $20 a month. If you can do that, you'll be a big help. Thank you all so much. Here's Jordan French.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This is
East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Marotta.
This is Stuart Copeland. This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
This is Jordan French, executive editor and founder at GritDaily News, and we're on the Break It Down Show.
And now, the Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
Yes, we are. And one of my favorite things to do with the podcast is get a chance to bring in other co-hosts. Now, a lot of you know this, but for those that don't, I have another show that I guess is technically on hiatus, but the longer it goes into hiatus, the more I wonder what we're going to do with it. But there's a show called Popping the Bubble that I just love the heck out of, and my co-host is someone I've known for a very long time, and I just love to have her around. And so even though we don't do a lot of new Popping the Bubble episodes, we do create Break It Down Show episodes on occasion, and today is one of those occasions. So welcome and thank you so much for co-producing with me today, Sandra. It's always wonderful, and we don't get enough time face-to-face anymore, so next time I'm in town, let's do that. But thanks for inviting Jordan, and let's talk a little bit about Jordan, and then we'll actually let Jordan talk. Hey, this is Pete. Real quick, I just want to let you guys know we are proud to announce our official support of Save the Brave, a certified nonprofit 501c3 with a charter of helping veterans with post-traumatic stress. Here's how you can help. Go to SaveTheBrave.com, click on the link on the website, and my recommendation is this. Subscribe. Give them $20 a month. You've got subscriptions that you can turn off right now that you're not using that are $20 a month. Swap that out. Get involved. Let's help these folks out. Thanks for inviting Jordan, and let's talk a little bit about Jordan, and then we'll actually let Jordan talk.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Pete. It's always fun to come and make a guest appearance on the Break It Down Show, bring in some tech perspective. So I love being your co-host and being able to extend those conversations. So really great to see you as well on video. It's been too long. And we've got Jordan on, Jordan is the editor of GritDaily, who is a colleague. And we're actually, I've been doing some writing on GritDaily as well. Thank you for joining us, Jordan.
Happy to join you both. Looking forward to the banter. More the merrier, as they say. We have 3 this time to both of you. Perhaps we'll include the audience in that too.
Yeah,
absolutely. Let me call them the audience. Let's call them my friends. So my friends, yeah, they listen and they'll definitely be participating. You're a serial entrepreneur because this is your 6th company. Holy shit, man.
Yeah, it's somewhat of an addiction, but also by saying I'm a bug in a rug when it comes to media and journalism. So it's very likely that this one goes for quite a bit longer. But I've been fortunate, just backing up even a bit before my entrepreneurial career. I'm an engineer and an attorney. When I was an engineer, most excitingly, I worked on Mars Gravity Biosatellite, which might play a little part in the story later on. It was a NASA-funded project that in the early aughts, as we call them, around 04 and 05, I was on that project, worked with mice to look at bone loss rates for when humans go into space. More broadly, everyone knows NASA, of course, stateside space exploration. More broadly, that was part of the Mars Initiative. It's a pair of words many people heard before, but I'll explain it. Mars Initiative looked at, well, someday we realistically might want to get humans on other planets. Mars is not terribly far away. It fantasized it plenty in film and writing historically. It actually does serve as a reasonable offer. Harsh, we definitely know that now, but general consensus at NASA was we might have screwed this one up, referring to Earth, and we might need to kind of do a restart elsewhere. So part of that was looking at, well, if it's going to take us 3.5 years to get from Earth to Mars, we need to see what happens to the human body. And one of the things that happens now we know well is you lose bone. You kind of turn into a bird. It's like osteoporosis. You hollow out. And we've certainly heard at least some anecdotal stories when people come back to Earth, they crumple. So just to give you a quick preview, hardcore engineering, it's like aerospace engineering. I was a biomedical engineer. Took a turn towards the law. I knew I was going to go in that direction. I worked for FERC, that's the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, for a couple of years. This is a bit later. And you were all my clients. What I mean by that, I was in those people versus cases. There were the usual suspects of kind of big energy companies and plenty of Canadians trying to manipulate energy markets. What is in the purview of the Energy Commission is natural gas, to some degree oil, and all those big sort of interstate electrical power lines. So I've had a pretty diverse career before I even started my first company. Really quickly, though, GritDaily is my sixth. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, quite a bit more. Exited out of my first one, which was a good-sized agency. Kind of returned after a stint at a software company that I co-founded and a few others. One is a cage-free egg farm called Lisbon Hill Farms with some wonderful hens laying eggs. One was BHEX, so it was a turn back towards aerospace, and we kind of got it well known for feeding astronauts. And to unpack that in a sentence, we 3D printed pizza to eat in space on their way to Mars with robots.
Amazing.
So I'll leave that one there. That's some of my background.
Jordan, you're really making us feel like underachievers here.
Yeah.
You have like how many degrees? You're an engineer, you're a lawyer, you're a marketing expert, and an entrepreneur. How has that multidisciplinary background served you in all of your endeavors?
Well, it's great for journalism, which we do today. You mentioned earlier you also write for GritDaily. I'll market you a bit. Sandra also writes for Forbes. She's written for other publications. You wear many hats, but it's great having you on Team GritDaily. My background feeds that well, right? So journalists typically, you want to know a little bit or a lot, as much as possible about everything. And it's hard to cover that much ground. It definitely helps having legal background. I think I represented you, all you American citizens between 2010 and 11 or so pretty well as an agency attorney at the Energy Commission. And also being an engineer, you think about things a little bit differently, and you think about marketing differently. You think about media a little bit differently too. So all that served me well, certainly for what we do today in media, and especially at GritDaily, which I run.
Yeah. Do you think that people should pursue multidisciplinary backgrounds in today's world?
Yes, but I think variety is the spice of life. I mean, let's definitely start there. That said, it doesn't necessarily have to be through formal education. In fact, plenty of podcasts, including this one, have, at least mentioned or implied at one point or another that maybe a college degree isn't necessarily the way to go. And to explain that more, I'm not preaching that people shouldn't get educated. It's just that you can learn in many ways. It all starts with relationships, right? To people who can mentor or maybe have experience doing something. That relationship doesn't necessarily always have to be with a college professor, after which many college professors spending time with them and writing things under some form of pressure. A few years later, you get ink on a piece of paper that describes formal education. There's other ways to get educated. I probably learned a lot more from just working with other people and hopefully learning from other people's mistakes, certainly plenty of my own. That can be the greatest. That experience can be the greatest teacher.
Let me ask you a little bit about that, because obviously I think that's totally correct, right? But the value of that education, I've got a bunch of ink on a wall that, I don't know, actually it's in a box somewhere. I don't even put it on the damn wall. It is a bona fides, right? It says that you can get within a program and achieve this standard. And in our day now, it seems like everybody's an instant expert. I'm a life coach. Jesus Christ, you're 24 years old. Like how are you? I mean, God bless, maybe you are, but it's a little hard to believe. Or you're a 22-year-old fitness model. Like, yeah, I get it. You're in shape and you want to be a trainer, but you're 22. We can't have instant expertise. So the college thing does have a place. But then when I look back at my college career, and I've done a lot of it, the things that stick in my brain that I know I use on a regular basis have really nothing to do with my day-to-day work. So there's a lot to be said with what you're saying. The understanding of theory is sort of tertiary, I would say, but you do have to prove to an employer, to a client, that you actually have the ability to stick through something like United States history from 1865 to 1975, because no one wants to study that shit. But you did it and you got through it.
Yeah, I would agree, at least perhaps up until recently. And we can opine on what it means today, but it was a signal to the marketplace that had certain qualities, right? There was a lot less variance in education, at least historically. I mean, if we go way back, there was a certain, gentry, right? Like almost like a club that would go get a university education, and it carried with it a certain symbolism more than anything. As that variance has increased and there's been more access to education, and that's certainly a good thing. Some of that signal's attenuated. That's definitely not a bad thing, but it's also opened the lid and shed more light on what is really an industry, a business, mind you, that in some cases hides behind a flag of nonprofit, but some of which is a bit suspect. So you just mentioned that a lot of what you learned wasn't necessarily in school. I echoed that sentiment too. Sandra would too, right? It's from experience. And without that, that sort of tailwind, if you will, that it's had, there's been, frankly, a lot more scrutiny, and that's of the education industry, and especially higher education. And that's a welcome thing, right? I mean, that's a good thing. It's good for these institutions. And in some cases, a lot of them do need to change. A lot of them have changed. Some, I'll give a really concrete example. MIT, where I was working on the aforementioned Mars Gravity, is made a big push to offer a lot of its coursework digitally online for free. Why not, right? If someone really wants to learn about kind of like, synthetic robot, like haptics, let them learn, right? Coding and programming, generally these things should be open to anyone and everyone if it's possible at all. In a lot of ways, it's almost akin to media, government, and other things. It can be a public good, right? And so a lot of education administrators definitely want to think about that. And I think that they do. I think they certainly mean really well. But like many industries, it's certainly going through a big change, like you said.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that all of that education is now available online, and really democratizing the higher education process and giving people the ability to learn really whatever is in their interest. Maybe we could just take a step back and talk a little bit about what led you to GritDaily, and how is GritDaily in terms of a publication and a media site different from what else is out there in the market? What made you decide to launch GritDaily?
Yeah, it's got a pretty cool background story. The abridged version, which I can certainly talk about, it actually started with a book called The Gritty Entrepreneur. And I exited my first company by lawsuit. The sort of messy way to exit, which worked out well for me. But one consequence of that was I couldn't, write about sort of any of that. And that kinetic energy that I put into the book, I figured, well, let's continue writing, but in a positive direction, right? There's definitely room in the market for more high quality news coverage. There's a few certain ethos that a lot of people share with me. We'll unpack that in just a bit. And so GritDaily was born. Notice the similarities in the name between the Gritty Entrepreneur and GritDaily. People can find plenty online about sort of the earlier genesis, but that's what spurred it, and it's worked out great. So on the ethos, one of the things that we saw recognized and wanted to do something about was a lot of women-led companies didn't get as much coverage as perhaps they should. That's been something that GritDaily has tilted towards. It reflects certainly in the writing when we decide, who and what to cover, and that's embodied in a lot of the staff, and columnists who, frankly, are lion's share are women. I think it's a great thing. Certainly something that we'll continue to do and push. Really, though, what that reflects is undiscovered gems. So news media itself has had a lot of pressure on it to monetize. And so a lot of stories, local or otherwise, certainly don't get picked up. Now, more broadly, back to GritDaily, it is a trade publication. So it's a business trade publication in the style of Fast Company, maybe a little bit more consumer-oriented like Mashable. There's plenty of overlap. A lot of it's in a fun way. There's a lot of great people at those two, at Vice, at Adweek, at TechCrunch, certainly at Forbes, who we not just are friends with, but collaborate with in a lot of cases. I'll give a really quick example. We do a lot of events, which we can talk about more again later, but we'll co-host a speakers dinner at Web Summit this November with VentureBeat, right? So we do a lot with other media. It's just that we have our niche, and that niche is covering brands and how we interact with them, which is a very, very exciting space, and also gives us a lot of latitude to cover, frankly, a lot of what we want. And certainly we'll talk about some specifics of that later on the podcast.
Amazing. When you say grit, let's unpack that. What does it mean to be gritty? I love the word grit, and I love that you've incorporated into both your personal brand for your book and also the media site GritDaily. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, definitely. So I've been called it before. A lot of it's when you're persistent, independent, and want to drive an initiative forward against not all odds, but often that's the case. So life's not easy. We all kind of know that. If you want to do something, you got to apply yourself to it. We hear that, when we're coached in exercising in sports teams, in academia. It's something that has entered the psychological vernacular a little bit more recently, but it's always been there and has been real. And even if it's often a pop psychology reference, often people can identify with it because we've all kind of gone through a moment or thematically part of our lives that, frankly, was tough, faced some hardship, and hopefully overcame it. And a lot of times it's not failure; it's what you learn from it, and that initiative that you take is grit, and that endeavor was gritty. And so, as it relates to GritDaily, what you often see is a thread of that, a needle that threads a lot of, especially the entrepreneurial work that we do or coverage that we do, is people taking on an industry or some incumbents that, aren't necessarily where odds are in their favor.
Yeah, and essentially, to be an entrepreneur, you really have to have that ethos that of perseverance and doing whatever it takes and not giving up.
Yeah, definitely. And thematically, we talked about, some of the ethos. We really do. We genuinely tilt towards women. We feature them a lot more at our events than men. And it's not necessarily a gender thing, but literally women and minorities have been the underdogs, right? And so in this sort of what I like to call the Jackie Robinson effect, you often have to be, and frankly unfairly, like a little bit better. And a lot of times we can cover that story or shed some light where maybe VCs in the past have turned an eye, or VCs being venture capitalists or other investors have turned an eye away from it, or media, which, in large part, even to this day, is predominantly men. We're able to give that a little bit more balance than might have been there, yesterday, so to speak.
I love that. And as you know, I'm a big proponent of helping underserved communities such as women and Latinas, and Pete is too. So just so great to be in alignment there. One of the things that we have coming up, Jordan, and that I'm super excited about is this panel that we were putting together at South by Southwest. So I kind of wanted to, talk a little bit about that and, why it's important to bring, this message to this event.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mentioned events earlier, so there's a good segue into that. So just like most media outlets out there, we try to and aim to definitely make ourselves accessible to the public. We host a lot of relatively small events, 30, 40, 50 people so far. We'll definitely do some big ones. We also do a lot of side events. I mentioned Web Summit already, but earlier this year, everything from Webbit to Collision up in Toronto, even ICQT in Moscow, CES, South by this past year. We threw our own side event. We'll definitely continue to do a lot of that. Voice Summit recently, Amazon Alexa Voice Summit. I could go on and on and on. A lot of side events. We also integrate, of course, ourselves into those larger events like South by too. So what you're referring to, Sandra, we were in the running, what you might call a rather long, short list of groups or panels. I'm really excited about it because its genesis started with you. The title is Brands Can Do Good Too. Like I said earlier, we definitely cover brands and how we interact with them. It's the good, the bad, and the ugly. We've seen a lot of kind of questionable acts out there, especially on the advertising front from brands, social media, which is definitely at the core of what we do. Plenty of gaps on there. Like I said, a very, very exciting space. A lot of what we cover is often very, very exciting because that whole world is changing. And that's a good part, what we'll cover and talk about. One major theme, though, is kind of environmental action, right? And the world around us that we live in couldn't be more important, couldn't be more pertinent today. This talk relates to that too, because brands themselves are so powerful, not just the companies that sort of are them or own them, but because they reflect an image or have a reputation, they're symbolic of certain things, and they're also associate, right? And can kind of push certain initiatives. That's certainly something that we'll bring into that panel too. And the audience can be part of that by voting for us to speak at South by. And so we'll share a URL from South by as part of this podcast so you can upvote a panel that none other than Sandra Ponce Leon will be on. Cesar Hernandez as well, who's omni-public. He's also a columnist at GritDaily. He's in the Tampa Bay area and is on the transition team of Jane Castor, who's the first LGBTQ, she's, lesbian woman mayor of Tampa, of all places. Who thought that would happen? He's on her transition team. Drew Rosso, formerly Forbes, who just interviewed some of the folks either that just got off Air Force One, like yesterday. He's in Dayton, Ohio now, doing some coverage and was not involved, but on the coverage side of the community that just experienced the tragedy. I think it was just a few days ago in Dayton, Ohio, and I'll be on as well. So it should be a really exciting panel. It's kind of the right people having that right conversation at the right time. That'll be at South by Southwest in March 2020. So do get out your sort of digital pens and vote. Just a quick registration to do it. And upvote Sandra so she can speak at South by Southwest. How's that for a plug?
Upvote Sandra, indeed. Let me ask you this. So as a news site and trying to create diversity and all of those things, I mean, all of that stuff is all stuff that we're interested in and support, obviously, but there are so many options, to get news, and it can be overwhelming. Give us kind of your I don't know, I guess not your elevator pitch because that's lame, but give us an idea of why we're going to spend time on GritDaily as opposed to any number of other places. We want news that works for us, but also educates us. So what do you guys offer that we're not going to get somewhere else? Hey, this is Pete A. Turner from Lions Rock Productions. We create podcasts around here. And if you, your brand, or your company want to figure out how to do a podcast, just talk to me. I'll give you the advice on the right gear, the best plan, and show you how to take a podcast that makes sense for you, that's sustainable, that's scalable, and fun. Hit me up at pete@breakitdownshow.com. Let me help. I want to hear about it. We want news that works for us, but also educates us. So what do you guys offer that we're not going to get somewhere else?
Yeah, certainly. So we curate and pick some of the most kind of compelling, relevant stories and give a foundation to them. So not just news bites per se, but what you might expect of a trade publication, which is a bit more analytical, bit more analysis, and from the right people. And when I say the right people, I'll use Drew as an example, and then certainly Sandra here too. Drew Rosso is a practicing attorney. It's not that often that you see it actual practicing attorneys writing on the news side. So he's covering things and explaining them from a legal lens that might not be offered really anywhere. It's almost akin to Wall Street Journal level reporting, and that's here at GritDaily. And they're not covering all the stories that we necessarily are. Sandra as well had a storied career in entrepreneurship. She's actually done things, not just reported on them. That's not a knock on journalists. It's just that expertise can be particularly helpful when you do read some of her latest work. A lot of it's on the ocean economy, right? And she chose that. It's not an editor who's necessarily told her what or how to write or to implement a particular, economic or political dimension. So you get a lot more to the root or marrow of what information that they want to convey. It can be kind of a richer read. So that taps, sort of the information or morning brew, that style of writing. It's pretty damn concise. It's also what has let publications like Axios or Quartz QZ come out of nowhere over in the last decade or even the last couple of years. And that reflects in our following and traffic. GritDaily, which really just launched early last year, has ballooned. It's caught on some level of notoriety. The other aspect to sort of point 202 I'll make is I mentioned we're accessible. We're really accessible. People can really come out to our events. They're open, they're ticketed. A lot of times we'll hand out free tickets. They're super cheap anyway. Have a few drinks. We always have toasts often to something pretty cool at our event. Sandra and I just hosted one in the Bay Area with Health Tech Women and Siren Care. Health Tech Women being led by none other than Carla Brenner. Give a little name drop on the podcast. And we really stick to covering a lot of things that also people aren't necessarily getting to see, or at least certainly in depth, that's elsewhere. But, certainly your point's well made, but we've certainly found our niche and have a pretty cool and core audience that loves what we do.
Yeah, I would definitely just second that. And I love the variety of topics that you can find on GritDaily, everything from entertainment to, more in-depth research into topics like ocean tech, like what I cover. So yeah, thank you for the plug, Jordan. And it was a really fun event. I learned a lot, and we got to see some really exciting new products that are coming to the market for the medical community, and specifically for diabetes, a sock that has built-in sensors in it that's created by Siren Care. And it was just a really great panel. So really fun. And I'm really excited about the upcoming panel with South by Southwest as well. Just, in terms of having had a really long marketing career here in the Valley, and kind of seeing how brands are now being held accountable to a higher standard, which has come, not only with the new consumers that are coming to market that are, maybe a little bit more socially inclined as millennials, but, also how digital transformation is also fueling that trend, and how all of these new touch points that brands have to keep on top of, like mobile, like social, like VR, like all of these, new types of technologies that they have to integrate to, really stay current, are also impacting, there needs to be customer centric, so to speak, and really hearing from the customer what the customer wants and aligned in terms of values.
Yeah, I want to actually ask and add on that, because I think what Sandra said is super, it's on point and everything else. But as a new company, we talk a lot about millennials, but the God's honest truth is I guess we're calling them digital natives, Gen Z. I mean, they're hitting 20, 21 years old now. They're in the marketplace. How do you account for them? Because, they're totally different in how they were raised. I mean, payphones, they have no idea what that is. They don't know how to work a map. They are so differently wired because of the digital native nature of their generation. What do you do with that?
Go where the eyeballs are. Media is in the business of attention, certainly. And so it's online, so we're certainly online. What's interesting, though, about what you say is it's never been more valuable to do things in person. So as everyone's moved online, the value of meeting people in person, getting people together for an event, especially more intimately when it is certainly fewer than 100, but certainly under 50 people, you really get to go deep and develop those relationships, and it's particularly important for reporters, because a lot of people read their stuff, much like authors. You all have experienced this podcasting too, where people go up to you and they kind of really know you. They know your life in some cases, especially in authors' situations. They'll pour their heart out in books, for example, but even in articles for reporters, they reach some level of notoriety. And so offering that up in a way where people can meet them, get to know them a little bit better. Certainly people do pitch. That's not a bad thing. Uncover certain nuggets. But it predominantly just drives in the other direction, despite the nativity, if you will, of millennials, of Gen Z, like you mentioned. Just like all humans, they certainly value the in-person interaction. So we offer that too. I think it's a comfortable space for everyone. And it's also a balanced approach. And so far, it works.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to kind of get back to the brands, because brands is your focus as a publication. And let's talk a little bit about why do brands, and kind of getting back also to our panel topic, why do brands, do you think, need to be held accountable? Or how do we avoid this greenwashing that we do see across the board with a lot of brands that want to align themselves with certain causes?
Yeah, certainly. So it's not just greenwashing. There's pride washing recently. There was a good story we put out on Greyhound. So in a nutshell, they don't have the greatest sort of history as it relates to LGBTQ community. And we pointed that out. Their attempts, just to explain what they did, was, basically try to come out and say, oh, we are all about LGBTQ. We've always been, and we've always been super supportive, and, yay rainbows. And I think it's important for people to know history. You mentioned greenwashing, and it's equally problematic. There's a lack of authenticity when there's something that's seems trendy and cool, and everyone just jumps in the bandwagon. One bit of news is, pointing that out, and there's really good examples of that and ugly examples. Either way, what we do is get to be in a position to help coach and work with, not just our audience, but brands themselves, to say, okay, well, there might be a better way to do that, or let's actually be authentic about it. It's not about doing something 1 month, right, for Pride Month. It's not about, planting trees on one day, right, like Arbor Day. Here's some examples of companies that maybe really embody that. And here's some stories where over time, look at the difference they can make. 100,000 trees were planted, for example, and about being persistent and embodying their approach as a brand and really owning a space rather than just jumping from what's trendy, 1 day or 1 month to the next, because there's a very real difference. Right. There's a very real difference to your customer, to your audience, and they really do relate. Audiences really do relate. Customers really do relate and make choices when a brand that they associate with or want to buy is truly aligned with that. Lacking authenticity and just jumping from trend to trend doesn't look authentic. There's a lot of room to move the needle. So in a lot of ways, about helping both an audience and a brand identify it or him or herself.
I love the concept of this, but I have to challenge you, right? Because this is where the healthy growth comes from. Greenwashing and all these things. The word unpacking has become, I don't want to say cliche because that's unfair, but it's fast approaching cliche. And authenticity, being authentic. Gosh, that is right there with it, where I'm so authentic. How do you not be greenwashed and not lose the authenticity of authenticity as that word becomes nothing? Like, how do you genuinely do that? How does that become part of a brand's ethos? I mean, what are the day-to-day things that you do, and how do you gather those eyeballs and those earballs so that people are like, no, these guys really walk this walk, talk this talk every day. This is what they're about.
Yeah, look, we do have to tell stories, and news, what comes from something that's new, right? Like by definition, right? And so there are early adopters. Obviously, media cycles are going to favor companies that were founded on, for example, certain environmental cause, right? And we'll cover that and share that. If it's a more recent phenomenon, we'll cover that too. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. And it's not our place to opine necessarily or offer an opinion or dictate, right, what an audience should think. But it's the washing part, right, that is news also. Right. And so if a brand comes out and says, oh, we've always been this way, and that's not true, that's something that an audience is going to want to know, good or bad. And that's what really makes a news cycle often at any publication. Right. We see that every day.
Yeah. And I think that also just to add to that, I liked what you said about the consistency and holding brands accountable. And I think that that's just something that we're seeing more and more of with the new digital natives that are coming to market and really, putting their dollars to use and putting their money where their values are. And I think that that's something that brands are starting to realize more and more. And I even if it starts out maybe as greenwashing or rainbow washing at the beginning, at least there is that visibility within the corporate structure that's understanding that there needs to be an alignment with the core values of the company and with their consumer base. So definitely I'm all for calling brands out that are just using these opportunities to get more growth, but at the same time it is also kind of a good thing, I would say, just because it does raise the visibility, and also they recognize that maybe it's just a one-day thing now, but they do need to start to incorporate these values into their day-to-day, whether it's marketing or product or, what have you, in terms of their business operations.
Right. And I'll add just a little more color on that too, in the sense that, first, just covering, washing and this sort of washing cycle over and over again. It's really just a fraction of our coverage, but it is an important part of it nonetheless. And I'll give you a really, really clear sort of theme with that. And that is, it really robs brands that do take these things seriously if we don't point out when someone's just hopping on a trend. Mm-hmm. And jumping from trend to trend, it's a bit disingenuous when they don't share or own their own history. It might not be on the positive side, and that's okay. It comes off a lot more believable when that does happen. We do try to share that. And so even if something does look antagonistic, it's truly not. And then second, you don't want to rob those that have had a history or really embodied for some significant amount of time, made some impact already, and otherwise dilute that and remove incentives from doing that in lieu of just saying, oh, sure, like all these companies or people have been on the bandwagon the whole time, or saying, oh, this is Arbor Day's coming up, so everybody's got an Arbor Day special. I don't think that cuts to the heart of what people really want to see. And we've gotten that feedback from the audience. Some of the strongest proponents, you get emails in, you see it in the pitches and you see it elsewhere. A lot of our supports come from, oh no, please do be sure to point this stuff out and cover it. And it encourages some galvanization around some themes that certain companies have certainly taken to heart, even, well before we existed, that I think a lot of consumers can resonate with, and they do vote with their feet, so to speak. They do make purchasing decisions based off of that. What we ultimately are doing then in that case is shedding light, right? Transparency. Right. Otherwise, it's frankly a form of corruption. If you diminish or otherwise attempt to hide what might be an adverse history, and again, rob from those that might have been sort of good actors in the customer's eyes for far longer.
Yeah, that's true. Since we are on the topic, what are some of the brands that are doing good in the eyes of their consumers and really, not just jumping on trends, but truly authentic in terms of their core values and being good corporate citizens?
Yeah, certainly. There have been some big players. We want to specifically name names. A number of consumer package companies, from Nestle to Procter & Gamble and Unilever, have taken some pretty big strides that we've all seen, right? And it's a move away from non-recyclables. They're looking at packaging as much as possible. And a lot of those conversations are serious and they're very impactful because their goods, sort of proliferate, right? They're sort of everywhere. That's one certain species. Certainly, there have been a whole new crop of tech companies out of Silicon Valley, New York's Silicon Alley, and elsewhere that, from an environmental perspective, have embodied that right into their charters. For example, looked at their own energy use and said, okay, maybe there's a better way to do things, and even ergonomically or with their own workforce, and say, offer up work from home options and implement other things that might be impactful on quality of life. And it just doesn't have to do with environment or waste or reuse. It's more broadly on that initiative of quality of life, right? Certain brands are looking at how they treat their own employees, and some of those that might have children, right? And some of the amenities that they might want, right, or need, and accommodate those. And some of that might relate to LGBTQ, like we mentioned, right? So thinking about, what labels do you think you want to put on bathroom stalls in the buildings that you occupy? So some of these are at least some of these are specific examples that we pointed out. Like I said, the good, bad, and the ugly. There's plenty of good out there to report on. There's a lot of new products, especially technologies. We did mention Siren Care earlier. It's an approach at serving the diabetic market, which has kind of long been overlooked by investors in the medical community, and that's with socks that assist that population. We cover a lot of that stuff. I know we've a piece coming out. It might be as early as today on the natural nipple. Turns out that breastfeeding has approximately 2.5 options, something that not many have talked about, not many have solved. It's either bottle or breastfeed. It's time that we bring these kind of conversations and products that serve those markets out in the open. That doesn't mean we're just aggrandized, self-serving, pushing a certain gender or women's initiative. A lot of the stuff that we cover might be in sports and, what others might consider some sort of manly approach to things, but there's new things there, right? New services and products there that haven't gotten the limelight for one reason or another. Oftentimes it's because big brands are serving advertising dollars to other publications, and we're in a position to shed some light on those.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you one more question before we wrap up, and it's along those same lines. You're talking about a lot of different issues. What's the biggest issue that requires the most education, where just in general, because like you, I talk to a lot of people for a living, and I gather up information on what people care about and think about. Defining what the qualities of a good president are escapes us as a group. We can't even stick on the task of what are the good attributes of someone who's, should be president. Like, we really get stuck there. So when it comes to these big, huge problems, what's the one you're like, I just wish more people would write about this to give us some more insight as to the nature of this problem and what it might take to get us moving in the right direction?
Yeah, certainly. Like you mentioned politics, and it's not really what we cover as a trade publication, right? So we are a business trade publication and predominantly focused on brands. That said, a lot of this stuff gets political really quickly. We've seen plenty of boycotts and protests of brands where some political value doesn't align with a consumer base, and that's consumers' choices. Squarely on your question, though, we've embodied, the immediate answer, right? Which is, if, for example, private equity, venture capitalists, all investors paid more attention to women, if publications truly, genuinely, in a bit more egalitarian way, offered up coverage of women-led brands, women-led companies, startups, what have you, it's at this point unquestionable that we'd have a larger GDP, quality of life would be higher, and so on. There's plenty of data that supports that. If we really just focused on one thing, that will be it. In a lot of ways, that is what we focus on. And it doesn't mean that, someone else gets diminished. It's more about what probably should have happened or should be happening anyway. Just like a market, we're driven in that direction, and that works for us. So, squarely, women's issues, and particularly as it relates to women-led brands and women in business, a lot of them are doing some awesome things that just don't get the light of day. Some of that has to do with, frankly, who's doing the coverage. That is what it is, right? And rather than just pay lip service to something, we can certainly focus there. But that would be, squarely what we're aiming to do. And that's GritDaily's identity is for its life will be to do what it can to level that playing field.
I love it, man. And that's a lot of what we do here on this show. You know, we grab experts and we talk about the problem at a practical, reasonable, rational level so that we can, you know, figure out what it is, whether we're breaking down a book or a piece of music or a policy. I'm not trying to make money by selling soap and Cadillac, so I'm not beholden to somebody else. I get to be honest. I get to be authentic.
You are one authentic brand, Pete.
Yes. And I get to piss myself off with my own hypocrisy all the time, which challenges me to grow and do things that I might not do otherwise. So I know that I'm growing from the experience of having a podcast. I'm positive that this venture for you with GritDaily is going to do the same thing. And I just think the world of what you're doing and taking on things, because otherwise you're right. The big companies buy the big ads that get the big attention, which lead, you know, it's a self-fulfilling triangle of effort. And, you know, it takes someone like you to lean up against it and show some grit. And when it gets hard, you continue to show grit and get after it. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely. And it takes a team. Just more on GritDaily, like any publication, there's a lot of people involved. Staff's small. There's only 7 of us, but there's over 200 columnists that write with some regularity, usually monthly, at GritDaily. So there's a lot of people involved who embody that. It's certainly not just me, and it's certainly I'm no movement, and I'm certainly not the first to say some of these things, but I do think, like you said, it's important to stand for something. And when you see that there's something you can do something about, because you know we could certainly just purely cover tech companies or just cover sort of new launches. We can make a little bit better and slightly bigger impact by tilting in one direction. And so, you know, that's what we do. And like I said, it works. It works so far, and it's not us, the audience, ultimately, that's making that decision.
Yeah. Well, it has been super great. As always, every conversation that we have, Jordan, I learn more about you and more about lots of things in general. And I'm just really grateful to be part of GritDaily and excited for our upcoming panel, and just really honored that you're choosing to give voice to people that do need it. And yeah, I mean, we need more diverse voices out there. So yeah, just appreciative of the work that you do as well.
Yeah, appreciate that sentiment. Appreciate having you as a columnist. You are also other media as well. I mentioned earlier, you also write for Forbes. A lot of people will read GritDaily, write for other publications. Oftentimes, you know, we're early in on a story, Pete. Sometimes we're the first ones to cover a new brand or a company. And so it's not even just what we do, it's what, you know, kind of ultimately comes of it, right? Beyond that. But certainly that's there, and we play our part. For those that want to check out GritDaily, it's really simple URL. It's GritDaily.com. That's GritDaily.com. We're simply at GritDaily, and we're on all the social media, YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, with some pretty cool content. Great team. Keep it pretty low key, pretty real out there. That's the love of independent media. So thanks for loving us back. And like Sandra said, we got that upcoming panel. We're on that long but short list for South by Southwest. Check out the link that we supply below in Pete's link for this particular podcast episode for South by, and give us an upvote so you can see Sandra on stage doing what she does best.
Thank you, Jordan.